And really, this is an interesting gathering of friends and comrades, and it's really a privilege and a pleasure for me to be here. I see Akin Bulu here from the guerrilla journalism days. Of course, Edet and I are from the Guardian family, and Abdulora as well, before CLO. Faith used to be on my board when I was chair of 90. Faith in Wadiya, she was a very active, shall I even say provocative member, because she was the civil society representative on my board, and I wasn't representing governor, but I was Minister of Mines, so I was chair on account of being minister. So when Kate brought all those harassments to the table about publish what you pay and disclose all the information that government is not disclosing, and beneficial ownership theory and all that, I was the one saddled with the responsibility of moderating civil society excesses, if I may call it that. Of course, Honorable Rotimi has told you about himself, so I wouldn't really say much about that. But I recall that he was my principal private secretary from day one as governor in Ekiti in 2010. And when some people were reluctant, when I decided to take asset declaration beyond just submitting it to the Code of Conduct Bureau and publishing my assets publicly at the time, many of my political allies felt, well, that's not the position of the law, Mr. Governor. You can't bring your civil society approach to government. You only just have to do it and submit it to Code of Conduct Bureau. What they do with it is their private interest. Nobody should gain access to it. And I say, if you talk about public servant, what is public about secret declaration of assets? It's a contradiction in terms. And it is only when you declare something publicly that those who know that you are probably declaring a little less than what you have, or doing anticipatory declaration, can come out and say, Oga, you don't have this thing you have on this. And at that time, the newspapers made a feast of my declaration, published it everywhere. And I think that also informed the work that was accelerated when we domesticated the Freedom of Information Act in the state. But all of that work would not have been possible if what my brother Larry said about civil society had not been in place. This work is a long struggle in gestation, and CLO will take a critical credit for some of that work, because even though we came from journalism, CLO provided the space out of which MRA itself came, and many other civil society institutions emanated. And it was fitting that Abdul launched that book yesterday. For reasons that he's aware of, I wasn't able to join you because of his African time. He told me 9 o'clock and the event did not quite start. But that's, I know I will have the opportunity to attend one of the other book signing. I think Capital Club is doing one that I just saw this morning in Lagos. So, but really it is a pleasure to be part of this exercise. MRA took that initiative, IPC at the start of it, and eventually it became law in 2011. But for me, it's not so much the letter of the law that is always important. and I think Honorable Rotimi made reference to that in passing. It's what we do with the law. We have information now. It's like when somebody says to you, oh, let us speak truth to power. Power knows truth. Power is always very informed about truth, but it's not convenient for power. And power selectively decides when to put truth to use. And it's the same with this. We almost have an information overload. And if you see the uncritical way people then utilize the information we have, and you cast your mind back to the kind of reports that CLO used to do in the late 80s, or the kind of investigative journalism that we were used to in this country in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you compare it to what is operating now in this superficial social media environment of 140 letters, then you would agree with me that you can have information without transparency. And you can have transparency without accountability. And for this to really be worth the effort that has been put into it, our people must not just internalize it, but live it. And that's what we've tried in our little way to do in Ekiti. But even when you do it, you'll be surprised that people don't necessarily, they will still be asking questions about things that are available. I mean, as you're sitting here now, if you go to Ekiti State portal, and I hope it's still like that, in fact, I think it is like that because I checked a few days ago. You can go to the public procurement portal of the Ekiti State government, and you'll find every single information about who tendered for a particular contract. How much was it awarded for? Who eventually won the contract? What is the company details from CAC? You can get it from Ekiti State as I speak to you here. And you can get every aspect of that and even in the federal government of Nigeria. A time there was, and I think it's almost standard now, so people don't talk about it again. FAC allocation is published. You know how much has gone to your local government every month. But what use do we put that information to as civil society actors? We do very well sometimes. I mean, Budget did a beautiful job a few days ago about padded budget at the federal level and insertions. Honorable Rotimi is here to respond to that if you want to take him to task. And various insertions that had nothing to do with the agency in question. The palace in Hulea, where the majority leader, my own good brother, comes from, Honorable Abdul, is his territory. In the budget of some science and technology agency. And that budget is littered with those kinds of things. So you then ask yourself, why is it that we really don't have fully functioning budget? We need to really change our own budgetary system and approaches. But we wouldn't know this if there hadn't been a Freedom of Information Act that allows the publishing of budget for civil society actors to analyze and then come out with such information that budget presented us with. And they've gone a step further. I know that annually budget does this. Accountability Lab too. I don't know if there's anyone from Accountability Lab here. They also do it. Every year they do analysis of state transparency. And I know Ekiti is always first or second in the last 10 years. Regularly, we are either first or second in budget analysis of state transparency. When I became chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, we started an initiative, some of you may be aware of it, called SIFTAS. And SIFTAS is State's Fiscal Transparency, Accountability, and Sustainability Program. And what do we do in SIFTAS? We encourage peer pressure among states and ensure that information about state finances are published, but not only published, but also audited. So throughout the time I was chairman of the Governors Forum, every single state in this country had an audited budget, which had never happened before. States don't normally bother about, they will just give you financial statements, not audited financial reports. But we started doing that consistently, and I believe that must have also continued. We also tried at the time to ensure that state budgets are presented to the houses of assembly at least and passed at least 8 weeks before the end of the year. So by October ending, we expect all state budgets to have been comprehensively debated and an appropriation act emanating from it in the state assembly. You may say, well, of what use is that if the budget is passed and we know how much has been allocated to this ministry and you still don't access the funds, as is the case now. The federal budget 2025 that Honorable Rotimi and his colleagues passed in November. I think they did it in November, both in the House of Rep and in the Senate. Not 1 naira of that budget has gone to any MDA as I speak to you. Ministry of Justice is here, maybe. They have not received 1 naira from 2025 budget, and June is 2 days' time. So meaning 5 months with no allocation. Even though on paper, we have federal budget 2025. But that's also part of the task that I think civil society actors have. So that it's not just attacking government. How do we also come to the aid of those MDAs who we expect to work if they don't have money to work? So we should be raising these issues. I don't think I've seen it in any newspaper or any, maybe I've not been following actively. But nobody has even brought out this, that look, this budget has been passed, but no ministry has accessed it. Of course, they may argue, as you know, government, we would always have a response. They may argue and tell you that, well, we're still spending budget 2024 revised. You know, they had 3 budgets last year, or even 4 budgets. They had actual, they had revised, or is it supplementary? Supplementary 2023, actual 2024, supplementary 2024, and then now 2025. So maybe some of the money appropriated in those previous 3 budgets are still being spent. And that is why they have chosen not to implement budget 2025. But really the point to make is that this is a very, very important exercise, and we almost commend the work that has gone into this aspect of the SDGN EU project. And I really want to commend the drivers of this initiative for the excellent work that they've done in opening government up, because government has often been treated as a mythical entity before now, and it is like an elephant. So you can never see all of it. It's only the side of it that is nearer to you that constitutes your own knowledge of government. But this gives us, if we really actively follow through, a 360-degree view of what is going on in government and organizing around it in a manner that we don't just agonize. Because more often than not, there's a lot of people agonizing about what is wrong in government and not taking the right step. And that's why, I must also use this platform to commend Honorable Abdul Oro. I really urge all of you who are here and those who are not here to read Demonstration of Praise. You would appreciate more how we got to this point in our historical trajectory, especially for people who are younger than 30, because what he covered in the book was our trajectory from, if you like, 1983, the collapse of our last democratic journey, to what currently obtains, and the role of civil society in that exercise. All of the people here, I think I without fail, almost everybody on this table that I know in our past struggle were mentioned in that book. The section on people like Edet and late brother Chima and Bamidele Aturu, Emaize Azu, Lanre Arogundade, all of them, Chido, Onuma, you find it and very well written in attractive prose. So I really urge you to read that book. But it also underscores why we cannot just leave politics to politicians alone, to professional politicians. Everybody here was an active player in that struggle to get us out of military dictatorship. And part of the work that we all did was exposing and demystifying the military, because they were supposed to be the all-conquering military. It's like what I read these days about some funny guy called Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. And I ask myself, is it that our history is defective, or we're so disillusioned with the failure of governance that we're ready to embrace any pretender to the throne? Because that is what it amounts to in a lot of ways. And for those of us who grew under military dictatorship, we shake our heads and say, you don't know what you're asking for, and you might get it if you are not careful, and it will not be palatable. For those who may be looking in the direction of Ibrahim Traore in Nigeria and other failing democracies that we have. But what is the point I wanted to bring out in Abdul's book is his conclusion that we can't give up on this country. That's the conclusion of that book. What's and all failures that we have dealt with, challenges that we're still confronted with, we can only build a better society if we insist on a better democratic culture. And a better democratic culture can only come from a culture of transparency and accountability, a culture that questions leadership, a question that insists on putting our feet to fire. When we were in Ekiti, we used to, prior to every budget in the state, we would go around all the 132 communities. And I attended. It wasn't as if I sent commissioners or special assistants, and asked the community, what are your top 3 issues in this community that you would like us to attend to? And they will say, oh, it's our primary health center. Oh, it is our Kabiesi's palace. Sometimes what they tell you may not align with what you think is the need of the people. But in politics they say the people are always right. It's not true. The people can be very ignorant at times about what is good for them. They will say it is the palace of the Kabiesi that we want fixed, or it is some other. So they will give us, and we'll go around. And we will incorporate some of this in the state budget. And then also separate some for them to handle, and the state gives them money to handle some of the projects themselves. And what we found out consistently, Akinrotimi was my PPS, so he will remember this very well. Consistently in our small Ekiti State was virtually all the projects we gave to the towns union to manage were delivered on time and on cost. But our own projects in the state that we contracted to advert, tender process, procurement, you know the works. So sometimes these things that we talk about, transparency does not necessarily produce accountability. And those in government will tell you that, with due respect to my brother from the Ministry of Justice, virtually every director in the civil service, they have 3 quotations in their drawer. When the work comes out, when the advert is made, the 3 companies that will quote are the 3 companies by the director. Yes, if you go to CAC, it may not contain his names or his family members' name, but some of them are even careless. They will put their own family persons on the directors of the company, and they will award that contract. They will say, oh yes, they will give the marks. You know, they always have tender procurement analysis sheet. Oh, this 80%, 20%. They work to an answer that they already know and call it transparency. And I'm telling you that we get more value for our money from community projects undertaken by the people. And they will give us breakdown how they spend the money than our own projects professionally awarded, advertised, assessed before due process, before procurement, before the contract is awarded. So I think as we talk about these things, in a technical sense, we should also know that these processes are just not technical alone. They are political. And we also have to be political. We have to insert politics into our policy making, but progressive policy, politics. A politics that really advances the interest of the people, ultimately. Because more often than not, we tend to focus on the irrelevancies and on things that really don't ultimately bring transformational change. They will bring cosmetic change, they will bring change that we can put in the newspapers, but not fundamental transformation. And that is why, for many of us, democracy is not delivering. But it is an academic as well as a serious argument to reflect on. Can this democracy deliver simply on account of competent people being in government alone? If the institutions cannot undergird that democratic development we all seek, it's a chicken and egg situation, but I think it is something that ultimately I would like to encourage us to reflect on as we listen to the work that MRA, IPC, and others have done over the years. We should be able to come up with some case studies that really demonstrate how much has been saved. Because sometimes this thing is carried on at a very high level. When we were at 90, Faith will remember this. When we do our audit, we do audits at 90. Audits in the petroleum and gas sector and audits in the solid minerals sector. And we often look at precisely the revenue going into NNPC, for example, or any of the institutions, and how the expenditure aligns with the revenue and the savings that we have managed to make. Sometimes, NNPC people are not very happy with the results that we come out with at 90 at the time, but at least you can see a pattern of savings, of irresponsible expenditure, of grand and little theft, of brazen criminality. And I still see a lot around us now that we need to pay attention to in procurement, in expenditure, in value for money, because sometimes it's not just stealing. Government people, I don't believe there is anyone who comes into government with the feeling that, look, I just want to go and steal. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think so. But sometimes, processes, procedures ultimately don't produce the right results, and you lose money in the process. That is lack of value for money, which may not be intended, but is the result. How do we cut down on this? And how do we even cut down on bureaucracies? We've been talking about the Oronsaye report in this country for the last decade. Instead, we are adding more agencies. We now have regional development commissions all over the place. And when you analyze at least the one that has been active amongst them, the Northeast Development Commission, when you really do an audit of the Northeast Development Commission, it's been active now for better part of 5 years, even older than 5 years, because it was our first term, first Buhari administration that did it. You will discover that Northeast Development Commission was supposed to be the bridge to help rebuild an insurgency-racked zone of the country. We are almost back to even more insurgency now, almost a decade. And what does Northeast Development Commission resort to more often than not? Constituency projects. I'm not saying constituency projects are not important. My own honorable is undertaking a fantastic set of constituency projects in Ekiti. I can say that in my own jurisdiction. Yes, he's my son. You may say I'm biased, but the truth of the matter is you can see the projects. But we know that this is often not the case in many constituencies. It's just money to line pockets. Or sometimes it is a deal. Honorable Oro is there. He wrote some things in his book that you should go and read. I don't want to say say it out publicly here. But when I finished reading the book, I had to send him a note that no. You've done us a favor with this magisterial account of what really happens in government. Because those of us in civil society, we don't know what goes on in government, frankly. We don't. Or we imagine we do. But until you are in there and you see the degree of the mess, then you begin to appreciate why you need a critical mass to transform the society, not just isolated presence of good people. Good people is not enough. Integrity does not solve this problem. And it will not. We need to do more than that. Much more structural reformulation of our society needs to happen. And I think what is happening here with the work that you are doing is one that we must all encourage for the future of our country and the good of our children, because many of us here, we are past our diamond jubilee, so we are almost out of out of consideration. But for the younger ones that we claim to have been working for, we really need to lay this foundation. And I want to thank the team that has been responsible for this project. It would be good to, as I said, see more reviews, but I'm sure Edet would probably mention things that I may not even be aware of that has happened in the last 14 years of this work, and how we've taken on those things. Honorable Rotimi mentioned that, yes, they get reports of actions, but not reports of non-compliance. So the report of non-compliance should go to the same National Assembly via civil society if government will not submit it. Oh yeah, good. I'm glad you are discussing. Because there may be things that an ally in government may not be able to release because he's in government. Yes, we will say we're doing Freedom of Information Act. I remember when we get requests in Ekiti, when I was governor, they will send the request to me that they're asking for this. I say, hey, give them. What's your problem? Do we have anything to hide? How about there is Official Secret Act? I said, nothing. We don't have Official Secret Act again. Go and give them the information. Because we had a troublesome civil society person who is always sending us FOI in Ekiti. You all know him because he's our comrade in this movement. His name is FF. So because he's from Ekiti, he sends his lawyers to send FOI requests to me all the time. You said you have spent this in this budget, so can you give us evidence? I said, go and give him. So, and then you are bound to have people who will abuse the privileges contained in FOI. Let's also acknowledge that. Not necessarily because they need it for any good, but because they want to assert that they can use it. And since FOI is about something you can do without necessarily proving that you have a, what do they say in law? You have a locus. You don't have to prove locus in FOI. I just want information, give me. It can be abused, but again, every good law suffers from that. But I really want to thank you for the opportunity. I know the day is far gone, and I look forward to listening to the major presentation by my comrade Edetaen Ojo on FOI and other contributions. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. That was quite insightful, very